Hey there, this is Dan, the producer of Mark and Carrie. If you like this show, we highly recommend you check out Watson's other podcast, Trending Globally. You'll hear more in-depth conversations about politics and policy from some of the world's leading experts, including, occasionally, Mark and Carrie. You can find it by subscribing to Trending Globally on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, on with the show. Thanks.
Hello there, Mark. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Yay, we're back again. Fabulous fun times ahead as we slip towards chaos, authoritarianism, and possible Armageddon. Who's not up for a few giggles?
Have you been on your boat, maybe off the coast of Rhode Island, and the Postal Service picked you up and brought you in on charges of embezzlement?
No, that didn't happen to me. Did that happen to you or someone you know?
Well, I know we don't generally do this, but Steve Bannon, that just happened to him, I think around lunchtime today. And of course, what's so funny is that the Postal Service were the ones to bring him in. They had a Build the Wall fund group.
Right, and I saw this. I didn't know.
Yes.
How is the post office picking him up? When did they start doing this?
I didn't know that they had the authority to do that. Yeah, I'm with you. But also, Mark, on another point, people need to learn how to embezzle money better because they spent money on the classic stuff: cars, jewelry, credit card debt,
really?
house renovation.
Oh,
yeah,
it's so tawdry,
exactly.
right? So
Yes.
funny thing is, my wife listens to all these true crime podcasts because I think she's looking for like tips on how to murder me for the insurance money. But the funny, if you listen to these things, it's quite interesting that the numbers are so low. Like, I mean, people are murdering each other for like $30,000 in insurance money, and you're like, really? I mean, how much can you get? You must be able to get a hitman for like $3,000 to make it worthwhile on 30,000. Like and this is, to go back to the Bannon story, not that I've know anything about it, but topping extemporaneously. I mean, if you're talking about you're at the levels of cars and shoes and stuff like that, you're really not trying hard enough. I mean, that's absolutely
No,
true.
not at all. Not at all. Yeah, you're right. $30,000. I mean, it's some motivation, but I'm not going to get my mega yacht with my David Geffen mega yacht for $30,000.
No, and then you could be in like deep water away from the post office boats, so you'd be fine. You wouldn't have to worry about it. That's right. How's DC? Have you melted yet?
No, it's actually turned cool. It's a wonderful 85 degrees as compared to 99 degrees. I think there were like 40 plus days straight of above 90 and didn't get below 70. So not as hot as it has been on the West Coast, I know. What are you ready to go back to school? Do you have all your new Zoom outfits ready?
Well, I do. I bought a box of masks because I don't know what the ones that I'm going to get from Brown are going to be like. We were originally meant to go back as normal after Labor Day with a quarantine period. What happened was Rhode Island started to see a bit of a spike in cases, so now we're delayed to the 16th, which means that I won't teach my first in-person class until October the 4th. Mm-hmm. By that point, who knows where we'll be, the Klingons might have invaded, Donald Trump is actually a lizard god. The way things are going, who possibly knows? But let's get serious on this for a moment. What do we know about going back to school, which is usually the big thing we do at this time of year?
Well, I mean, it's which went around Twitter, the UNC student newspaper, the Daily Tar Heel, said that UNC has a cluster bleep on its hands. And that's what it seems at the university level, what it's like, at least, that the universities who are bringing students back to campus, essentially the framing is going to be, we're doing everything we can, but what they do off campus. And then if people get sick, well, you can't control 18 to 24-year-olds. But those who have brought students back, you think this would be the model, are already saying, oh, now go home. And this includes UNC, Chapel Hill, Notre Dame. I think Smith just recently reversed their policy decision as well.
Yeah, it's a funny one in the sense that, of course, everybody is aware of this, but you got a bunch of 18 to 24-year-olds who are all excited to be out of the house after lockdown, and they're hanging with their friends. They've all signed pledges to behave not like 18 to 24-year-olds. It's a really tough one.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting to see the state institutions, which obviously receive public funding, Cal State said really early on, and I guess, from a business perspective, we're able to say really early on, we're going online for the fall because they were able to because the cost to attend them is much lower than the $70,000 to $90,000 price tag.
But the reason their fees have gone up historically, at the past 10 years especially, is essentially because the public contribution to those institutions has declined. Why? Because boomers love tax cuts, right? So essentially, the money disappears, you have to charge more fees, you build more vulnerability even into the public system in this way. So the whole thing basically needs to be rethought. I mean, in a way, there's a weird way in which you could say that COVID coming along this way it's not a good thing, but what can happen is that this is the shock that the entire sector needs to reorient itself, because we forget that it's a pandemic. Pandemics pass, right? Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of this thing. Some people say we're in the third inning, we're in the fourth inning, who knows if we need a ninth inning, etc. But baseball games end. They do actually end, right? And whether it's a combination of, it looks like T-cell, this kind of background immunity from T-cells, lower numbers for herd immunity, vaccines if people take the damn thing, right, we will get past this. And when we get past this, I'll have already recorded a whole series of lectures. I'm turning this room or a room downstairs into a green screen studio. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to actually record all my lectures so that in the time that I'm in class, I can actually spend time with students.
Yeah, right.
Rather than sort of standing in a room talking at them, right? So there's ways in which we can really make this work and become much better at what we do.
Right. And actually increase the value, the human-to-human contact, which is increasing the value, and the less lecture. But you have a school-age daughter. Where are you on the closing? Where's her school on closing, not closing? I mean, the K through 12 is what seems to be the real issue in the back-to-school part, especially, obviously, for young school-age kids.
So I like the South Korean approach to this one, which is school's cancelled for a year, nobody gets a grade, everybody repeats a year. Just stop, right? There's no nice way to puzz through this. And the problem is you're not going to individualize it. So let's take my daughter's school, which is, a school that's small enough that you can put kids into bubbles and do all the right stuff, right? Well, if your background infection rate in the community and community transmission is high enough, it doesn't matter what you put in a bubble. They're going to walk out of the bubble at 3:00 and talk to other people and bring them back into the bubble, right? Yeah. If, on the other hand, you live in a place that's got very low community transmission, or it's died down. Interestingly, you don't see much about Sweden these days because we like to say, the Swedes screwed up, right? But Sweden basically went, I think it was 8 days without a death over the past 2 weeks. Yeah, there's a few back up, right? But it's completely collapsed, right? So if you're there or you're in Denmark, you can go back to the schools because your community R's down, right? Yeah. So it's these sort of big, it's the fact that the schools are situated in places, particularly in the United States, whereby we just have kind of like the worst possible management of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And some states are better than others. I don't want to poo-poo our Rhode Island. Rhode Island did a really good job. It started to go up a little bit and now it's coming down again. So maybe we'll get away with it, but large parts of the country simply won't.
Right. And I know this is an oft-repeated point, but of course, you can't open the economy without having people have the ability to go back to work with their kids in school too. I was just, going through the biggest school systems. New York is on a sort of partial staggered thing, like one day or, every other day sort of thing. Houston, first 3 weeks are fully online, and Chicago and LA are remote to start. I think Chicago said they're going to try to be in person by November. But those are millions and millions of kids that represent those school districts.
And also the one that we're not thinking about is what's the average age of teachers?
Yes, yeah.
If you're talking about a pretty vulnerable population, the entire thing hinges on a pretty vulnerable population being super exposed. Now, if you go to other countries, what have they done? They've basically retrofitted classrooms, they've given PPE, they've done other, and most importantly, they've got their community transmission rates down, so the chance of actually being infected is much lower anyway. We haven't done any of that stuff. We're like, here, have a box of Kleenex and some spray. Right. Good luck with that.
Well, and what's interesting in Chicago, too, is that they wanted to open, and it was the teachers union that put the pressure on the mayor that said, we're going to go on strike if you can make us go back. And so that was just an interesting way to think about them just forcing the mayor on the issue, too. So I was looking at the retail numbers, and I don't even know if this matters, but the retail spending, and people seem to be excited about it, went up from June to, I think is reported early August, by 1.2%. Does that make it? I mean, it just seems like such a teeny tiny number, but I guess I see a lot of Amazon boxes, being ordered.
Well, people are still consuming. You when you're dead, you stop consuming, right? So, something
point.
went up by 1%, it went down by 2%, and went up by 1%. You're back to where you started. Hey, right?
Yeah.
So no, there's no news in that itself. I mean, I suppose the big continuing story, and we'll talk about Apple in a minute and its $2 trillion valuation, right? Stock market, woo, right, is now higher than ever. The economy is more pummeled than ever. Unemployment for the most recent set of figures was above 1 million, again on top of the total that we've got now. And of course, Congress fantastically managed to not do anything about extending unemployment benefits or actually giving a shit about anyone who works in the real economy. So, finance and that sort of stuff is great. The real economy, not doing so well. And, we've got these numbers that come out that we look at and go, oh, I wonder what that means. And the whole thing's just a bit of a mess, really, when you think about it.
Well, on the congressional part, I just couldn't. I mean, I could, but that they left and are not supposed to come back until Labor Day. There's a special vote for the post office, but what about? So the benefits are they just went away, and we're just waiting for people to come back from their Labor Day holiday. And I thought, if there's ever time for Congress to actually act, it would be in this moment. But instead, we broke for summer stuff and for the conventions and like all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is a sort of legitimate argument that if you say that if people are getting, say, 250 unemployment and then they get 600 on top of that, it's 850. So that's 3,400 a month. That's 3,400 a month after tax. That is a lot more than a lot of people in this country earn. Now, to me, the real question at that point is, why do they earn so little? Right?
Yes.
This becomes a disincentive, because for a country as rich as we are, a $20 trillion economy, that's not actually that much money. So there is a question of why wages are so low, but it is also true that, if you want to, I'll give you an example of this. We had a big storm that blew through here, and everyone's trying to get trees hauled out of their gardens and all the rest of it, and get fences rebuilt. And you can call a fencing company and they'll say they'll get back to you, and they don't. And then you talk to people who say, well, why are you not getting back to us? They say, well, the people that we usually use who are putting these fences up have no interest in doing this work, because basically they're getting that extra 600, right? Yeah. Now, the bigger one on top of this, right, not to say that that's the right way to think about it, or it's, why these people paid so little in the beginning, is what's the purpose of these schemes? Right? The purpose of these schemes is ultimately to basically maintain consumption for the economy as a whole, so that when COVID passes, we haven't done grotesque damage to the economy and we can go back to things. We'll always need fences rebuilt. When's the next time you're going for a body massage?
Yeah, 2090. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, even getting your hair cut, right? I mean, when's your next drunk mani-pedi with friends?
Right, exactly.
Right? No, a lot of this stuff isn't coming back, and we're just beginning to figure out what that means. I posted something on Twitter. It was an interesting story, and it was very Brooklyn and bourgeois, but it's an interesting story about a guy who ran a cocktail bar who said, well, that's screwed. So he turned it into a high-end grocery shop.
Oh yeah, I did see that article that you posted. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I just think that's how we should be thinking about this, right? It's all fine and well paying people not to work and all the rest of it, but the real question is, how do we get from where we were to where we're going to be? And we just haven't figured that one out yet.
You really know my life really well too, Blyth. The drunk.
I spy on you.
Yes,
I do. I totally. I'm actually your digital stalker.
You're like Bush to Putin. You looked in my eyes and saw my soul.
Exactly.
We have to talk about the post office. We've talked about this, but last time we talked about it, I kind of in my head was like, yeah, I mean, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Here we are with locks on post office boxes and the slowdown.
The removal of apparently 671 high-speed sorting machines in large cities. I wonder why anyone would do that. That's
know.
mental.
You just don't. I mean, and the post office, which is, as all the news has reported, like one of the only governmental functions that people actually approve of, and across partisan lines.
Right.
And really, it's we think about rural Americans. I mean, it's like birthday cards and mail. Like mail is nice.
The constant reminder for me that I'm eligible to join the AARP, which is like, thanks. That's really awesome. Thanks very much. It's great.
I mean, I think One of the way, obviously around vote by mail, and by the way, absentee voting and vote, and the same thing, is that it's the volume that will happen within a very short period of time, and that states have all these different rules and laws around when you can request your application. But between the states that are going to be, and I just looked at battleground states, between 4 days before the election and 10 days, and that's really where that 2-week time period before the election will be the major crunch. So I mean, the Chicago saying of vote early and vote often is really true. I mean, vote as soon as you possibly can. And Rhode Island actually is the state that has the earliest deadline for requesting. Right. That's in early October. So at least Rhode Islanders will be in good hands. But possible solutions, which I'm sure you've seen, are UPS and FedEx offering to deliver ballots.
Yeah, I don't know about this. Tell me about this. So what's going on? So is this Jeff Bezos just going, oh, I get to really piss off Trump with this one?
Well, yeah, I just saw a couple tweets about this, that, the UPS and FedEx should step up and say, we'll deliver ballots for free. Just drop them off wherever you can at whatever place takes UPS and FedEx. And then, of course, Bezos, because, they're the hate relationship that Trump has with them, the Amazon. I mean, why couldn't Amazon do it?
Yeah, totally.
Which would be pretty great.
But has he actually said he's going to do it?
Bezos has not. They haven't. He hasn't. Amazon hasn't said anything. Yeah, it's just a good gotcha thing on Twitter.
Yeah, well, in that case, it's not real.
No, that's right. But you can imagine it.
Yes, but one can imagine lots of things being true on Twitter. So, for example, there's a picture that was posted of a bunch of chained up mailboxes, right?
Yes.
And that was from Wisconsin, and it was on Twitter, and then made its way to the Guardian. So I asked a friend of mine who follows this stuff very closely, a political scientist in Wisconsin, is this actually true? Is this a picture? He says, no, it's a very old picture. It's been around for a long time.
I actually wondered that because, the government doesn't do anything quickly. So I thought, how is this happening so fast? I mean, they struggle to get stuff done quickly.
We replace postbox sometimes. That happens. Yeah. There's a post office dump for busted post boxes. So, we have to be careful in filtering this stuff out. To me, it's like the usual thing is follow the money, right? So let's think about the guy who's got in charge of this, right? So everybody knows he's a Republican donor, blah, 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 the rest of it. No, the really interesting thing is where this guy makes his money. He makes his money investing in alternatives to the post office. Right, so let's just do this on sort of like Central Asian corruption, dictatorship, TV, clunky, clanness, right?
Yeah.
Not only do you get a guy who's one of your financial backers to run the thing into the ground that you fear the most for your re-election, which you must win because otherwise you might be in trouble. You then put them in charge. But that person has a conflict of interest that would mean in any other circumstances. I mean, it's a bit like getting a defense contractor to run an investigation into why F-15s crash, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit like getting Boeing to run their own 737 investigation, right? I mean, this is a 10x more than that. It's like, I make my money from investing in UPS. I'm now in charge of the thing I want to destroy so that my investments make more money. You should never get that job.
Yes. Right. Well, and I want to privatize it, and then UPS will buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever. Whatever
exactly.
scheme it is. Right. Apple's $2 trillion. It's hard for me to imagine like $200, let alone $2 trillion.
$2 trillion, exactly.
I mean, it's always. I always think about like where's that? Like, what bank holds that money? And I know that it doesn't, but I just to like imagine this in my head. It's hard to think about.
Here's what we're basically saying: Apple is worth 10%, or the equivalent to 10% of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, that's just incredible.
Right. Now, as somebody who's been using Apple products since before I even arrived in the United States, I think my first Apple was 1988. So I've been stuck in the ecosystem for a very long time, right? I was dealing with them when Jobs left and they had clones. Mm-hmm. I used to know the techs by name. Right, you could literally, hi Danny, is it you? And it's like literally that used to happen. And now they're this like conglomerate, well not conglomerate, like behemothing giant companies worth this much. Now here's a really interesting question, and this speaks to a fabulous book that I read last week when I was away for a couple of days, which I'll talk about in a minute. Why is this thing worth so much money when it hasn't produced a new product in about 7 years? All it does is update phones to be more sophisticated than you could ever use, right? Mm-hmm. It took iTunes, which is a perfectly serviceable platform, and then broke it up into lots of things so that it becomes really annoying. Have I got a dongle lying around here? Yeah, I have. Right. You basically take all of the ports out of your computers and make you buy pieces of crap like this so you can plug the same stuff into it, right? What do they do? Why is this valuation going up? Apple is basically playing the same game as lots of other companies. That what matters is control of assets and technology. And you make money from that, and you basically build these little monopolies, like, Apple TV, versus Netflix or whatever, and everybody's paying a fee. And we're all subscribing to these services. And the market's basically making a bet that at the end of the day, when all this shakes out, Apple's going to be one of the few things standing, and Apple's going to be basically a monopolist across this entire ecosystem of products that it control. The fact that they're actually not making anything new, innovating, doing anything like that, no, it's all about basically, as this book was called, rents. So there's a book by a guy called Brett Christopher that's coming out at the end of August or in November, called Rentier Capitalism. And although it's about the UK, he goes through the UK sector by sector by sector and just shows how much of this is all about the control of assets. And if you make your money from the control of assets, think like a landlord, right? You own houses, you rent them out, right? How much innovation do you do?
Yeah, zero. You just are turning the same thing over again.
How much investment do you do? Think of landlords, right? How much investment do they do? Yeah,
right. Some paint.
Not much. Right, exactly. And basically, how much do they try and screw you as much as they can? Right, okay. Tons. So therefore, you've got collapsing investment, collapsing productivity, high inequality, all in one explanation, because everything's just about the control of rents and generating rents. And this is it. Apple is it. The fact that Apple is $2 trillion, that's it. There's nothing more going on.
That's why they're able to charge $40 for that dongle. That costs
and the stuff
less
that
than
they're
a penny
doing with
for
the
them
developers, right? So there's this huge game platform we're both too old to know about called Fortnite, right? And basically, when you do in-app purchases, you're meant to give Apple 30% of the money. And Fortnite basically went, no. And they went, well, get off our platform then.
Yeah. And Fortnite is big enough that they're able to do that and survive?
Well, they can survive on Android, but then there's some kind of problem there as well, and everybody's suing each other and so on and so forth. So that's welcome to modern capitalism. We don't do innovation. We just sue each other for rents.
Right. But meanwhile, there's no possibility for competition either, because they are able, they've got the best.
Apple, Android. That's it. Yeah. Think about it. So you're in DC. What are your choice of internet companies?
I think Verizon and maybe one other one, maybe two other ones.
Two that you're doing well, because it's usually just two, right? How many big banks are there in America?
4, a nice round number.
4 that control basically over 60-70% of the market, right? Actually close to 80% of the market, right? You can go through every sector, and it's basically giant corp that takes rents because there's no competition. This myth of America as a free market economy. We're wonderful at telling ourselves fairy stories, and that's probably the biggest one.
Right. Well, I guess the other side would be that, it was the market decided, and therefore Bank of America is like the best bank. And if there was a better bank than Bank of America, they would have won, but that's always like, that always.
Yeah, but that's complete nonsense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The reason being that like Bank of America has branches everywhere because they bought up lots of other smaller banks and killed the competition.
Yes. Yep.
Right, here's a good example, right? So central banks, the Federal Reserve basically lends money out to the commercial banking system, sends it out. And then they do their magic, and then it ends up in the economy, and this is how we end up with growth. That's one version of the story, right? Now, basically, the Fed is giving them money at pretty much zero interest. How much are you paying on your credit card?
Like 17 or 17%, 15%, something like that.
So if interest rates were a decade ago at 4% and they went down to 0, you would think that your 17 would at least go to 13. Nah, why not? Because there's only 4 of them, and nobody's telling them to do it. So we'll just make as much money as we can, please.
Right. Gee, when you talk about competition like that, it really takes the wind out of your sails, because you think there's no chance that anybody tiny, like in any sector, then can, make a new pair of shoes and suddenly make it or something.
So what does Google do when it finds a competitor? Either basically its lawyers buys them, or its lawyers pummel them.
Yeah.
That's so when I see Apple valued at $2 trillion, that basically tells me the market is pricing in. Basically, they're going to be the most successful monopolist rent seeker. That's basically it.
Speaking of pummeling, and Apple, California, really nice transition.
Nice segue. That was a good
I mean, massive, big wildfires again. I mean, poor California. They really are living in climate change with wildfires again and massive heat wave.
Yes, exactly. So of course, we're surprised by this, even though it happened last year and the year before and the year before.
Right.
Of course, we'll be waiting for November, because what happens in November? Not the election, internationally.
Oh, more fire somewhere else.
Yeah, it's Australia. Australia will be on fire again, and we'll be like, oh my God, it's amazing, they're on fire again. And it's like, yes, it's called climate change. It's 100% real.
Right. Yeah.
Did you catch Death Valley, the statistic? The hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's just a fluctuation. There's no trend.
But wasn't it like 90 in Siberia or something this summer? I mean, some insane temperature.
Alaska last summer was 90 at one point. I mean, the whole thing's going completely potty. Meanwhile, what are we worried about? Vaccines and COVID.
Right, and whether stupid people wear their masks or whether they get upset or not.
I mean, really, we're a walking Darwin Award, the whole species.
What was your take on New Zealand on the COVID cases? Because they had a string of days with nothing, and then was it a family of 4 contracted it? And not quite sure where it was from. I saw one article that they thought might come from, they worked with like frozen food.
Yeah, which is a very weird one, because I mean, the new research that I saw now or last week was questioning the whole notion that the virus lays on surfaces forever, right? Well, if you put huge concentrations of virus on it, yes, and then yes, you can freeze it, but like what concentration would you need it to be in to bring it back to life, whatever? I mean, it just goes to show you there's a lot of this stuff, even with like a reasonable government, with high social trust, with good contact tracing, you can get caught out. Right, I mean, they've shut down the whole massive city of Auckland, right? It's like 1.7 million people. It's the size of LA, right? So they're taking this very seriously, possibly too seriously given the numbers involved. But the alternative is, look what happened to Melbourne in Australia. They were doing fine, and then boom, it just completely blew up. So, we're not out of the woods by any measure.
Well, that was what was so interesting, is that they did the contact tracing with the 4, and they found 65, and then immediately shut this. And that was what was so impressive, is that it happened so quick. I mean, there was no hesitation.
Right. And it's very hard to do that here when you can't even get contact tracing off the ground, because people are worried that if you trace it to a business, the business gets sued and all this sort of stuff. So
it's like an invasion of privacy. Yes, all of that stuff.
It's also legal liability. It's the usual story.
Yeah.
We're going to have to run through a couple of topics very quickly in this one. As you know, I'm a Scot and a Brit, and if anybody's been following this, the British government and the Scottish government massively screwed up their university entrance exams, their A-levels and higher, as they're called this week. Just amazing. It's got to the point now that I saw a headline where Durham University is one of the most prestigious universities in the UK, along with Oxford and Cambridge, is actually offering to pay students, now that the exams have been regraded, they don't have enough physical places, so they're going to pay them not to come.
I mean, talk about algorithm gone wrong. I mean,
totally.
That's really when you think, well, Apple's not worth $2 trillion, although, not
So apparently the simplest way to understand this is they took grading on a curve to like the nth degree. So essentially, to avoid grade inflation, right, what they did was they took the teacher subjective assessment and then scaled this against like the average for the school over some period of time. And then they decided there'd be, a certain number of A's and a certain number of B's, whatever. And once you put all those bits together, what you end up doing is basically you run out of A's too quickly, you run out of B's too quickly, and you end up shoving everybody down. And then when you normalize that whole distribution, basically everybody gets screwed. But what really got everyone was if you went to a posh private school, nothing happened to you. It was very zip code specific. And if you were in a really poor area, because the historical average of the school has been poor, right, the deflator in a sense is bigger, right? So it just completely class biased the results. So now they've kind of fessed up and said, we screwed that one up. That's not even a solution. That just creates more problems for the universities. But the upside for this was the universities were terrified they wouldn't have enough students coming in because of COVID. Now they've got too many. So, I mean, only the Brits can screw up in such inventive ways. What else have we got?
Well, I mean, Belarus, which is like, they're on the knife's edge. That Lukashenko, I think it's close to being his name, won't stand down. course, backed by Putin. But, and it does feel like shades of things to come in the United States. But it sounds like he might step down. I don't know. I've been trying to keep track of this.
He's not going anywhere. Because basically what's he got on the other side? He's got the European Union saying, look, and I'll take Trump on this on his word on this one. You can't get the German army into their helicopters because they're broken.
Yeah.
Right? They can't scare anyone with tanks because they don't work, because there's no defense spending in Germany, like none. So this is why the Americans are taking their stuff out of Germany and sticking it in Poland, because they like them better and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But at the end of the day, neither NATO or the EU is actually going to do anything about this. So
So once
you know that, and you know that Putin's
right.
got your back, you're just facing down your own population.
Yeah. Actually, on this point, Blyth, a bit of good news. The Republican Senate Intelligence Committee did confirm in a report that Russia did not interfere, that they were doing bad stuff on social media in the 2016 election. So if you were worried, or if you didn't know,
really,
if Russia had done so,
I've been waiting for that one. I think we kind of knew that one. I believe that I think that Mario Rubio nonetheless came out and basically managed to say this completely exonerates everybody.
Yeah, something like that. And you're like,
exactly.
What is that? As we wrap up, I have a mystery for you, Mark. I don't know if you remember where you were in the summer of 1981. And one of the top songs on the Billboard charts was, and this is what I'm curious of how you feel about this person, is Phil Collins.
Okay.
He's British. He's a drummer.
Yes.
I thought you might, feel,
I can do the move. It goes da 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 da. That's how you play it if you're interested. Yes.
But this is the lighter side. So they're these two twin brothers. I don't know if you saw this on YouTube. They're from Gary, Indiana, and their handle is Twins, the new trend. And it's just really heartwarming. And they watch. I mean, they're 20, so they're watching all sorts of music.
Right. So this is like people who are listening to things for the very first time. I did actually hear about this. Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
Killed it, bro. He killed that, bro. He dropped the beat at the end of the song, bro.
Man, at the end of the song, I've never seen it.
And they were like, oh my God, who drops it 3 minutes into the song, right?
Yes,
exactly.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So that's such a song from my childhood too, because my older brothers and sisters were way into Phil Collins. So it was just like really nice to like watch them, because that's exactly their reaction was like, whoa, what's happening? So
apparently they also have a fabulous reaction to Dolly Parton as well.
Jolene, yes.
Jolene, exactly. Which I never quite really saw that as being in the same category, but there we go. Well, it's nice to know that, some people are still finding joy and hope and warmth in the world by basically giving 1980s pop songs to people who have never heard them before.
Yeah, exactly. But to Phil Collins, that song then debuted on like the Billboard top 10 songs or something. So he had no response to the twins. Like Dolly Parton was super enthused for them. But I guess in like in like another generation, we can have someone watching Phil Collins.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just keep doing it. Basically, what happened to the human race in its slow decline was just different people watching Phil Collins right until the end.
That's right.
Basically it. Wonderful.
Yes, well, it was great to see you. Continue to watch The Crown, or have you finished it?
No, I can't binge watch. I don't know how people can binge watch. I mean, I really don't get it. I mean, like each episode is an hour, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do have things to do, like go to the bathroom and eat. I mean, how do you get through 4 seasons? I mean, like, do people literally have nothing else to do?
They're very slowly paced. Yeah, they're super slowly paced.
I like one at a time. They're totally fine.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, take care. We'll talk to you. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.